patrolling the streets, hurried to the warden's post. His wife, Nancy, and their young children were at home, the little ones in bed. But Nancy knew the drill, and as soon as the first wail of the siren ripped the sky, she would gather them up and hurry them along the 200 yards to the shelter at the end of the street. They had an Anderson shelter in their backyard, but with 6 of them and the baby, it was a crush when they were all within. Angela, aged only 7, was particularly scared of going inside, crying hysterically if her mother insisted she must. So now, if there was enough warning, they had taken to joining their neighbours in the Parham Road public shelter. Tonight, hurried by their mother, they crawled bleary-eyed out of bed and poured into the street, scurrying along with only a fitful moon to guide them. When they reached the shelter, folk from the surrounding streets were already crowding inside, and they had to push their way in through the crush. The only one of the family missing was Vera. Too young to train as a nurse like her elder sister Muriel, or join up like her brother Tony, the Shawbrooks' 18-year-old daughter worked as a waitress at the Lord Howard pub, and tonight she had stayed on when the bar closed for an extra drink with Charlie, the barman. Dad will be out on duty, Vera had thought, and Mam will be in bed by the time I get home. She won't realise how late it was, and even if she does, Vera gave a shiver of anticipation. It'll be worth it to have a drink with Charlie. She had been looking forward to it all evening, longing for George the boss to call time and shut the doors. Then she'd be with Charlie. He had such lovely brown eyes, and his smile. She shivered in anticipation. As the sirens split the night air, Charlie grabbed Vera by the hand and, pulling her off the bar stool, hurried her out into the street, running for cover. "Come on," he urged as they ran along the road. They heard the distant sound of approaching aircraft, saw searchlights already sweeping above them. Charlie scanned the sky anxiously and knew there was not much time. "Come on, Vera!" "I can't go any faster," wailed Vera as she tried to run in her high-heeled shoes. They were her pride and joy, and she'd put them on specially for her evening out. But they were useless for running in. "My shoes!" "For God's sake, take 'em off then!" cried Charlie. Hopping from one foot to the other, Vera did as she was told. But bare feet weren't much better on the chilly cobbles of the narrow lane that led to the Parham Road shelter and safety. Followed by the roar of the incoming aircraft, they flung themselves down the steps and into the shelter, where her mother was already settling the younger children. "Vera!" Nancy stared at her daughter as the realization hit her. In her anxiety for her younger children, she hadn't realized that Vera had not been with them. In a voice sharp with anger, she cried, "Where have you been? You should have been home hours ago." Charlie melted into the background, leaving Vera to face her mother's anger. But even as she spoke, Nancy Shawbrook saw him slide away and suddenly realized that Vera must have come straight from the pub. She stared at her daughter in horror and whispered, "Where's Freddie?" "Freddie? What did Mam mean? Where's Freddie?" "With you!" cried the girl. "No!" cried her mother. "You always bring him." In the well-rehearsed evacuation of the house when the siren sounded, Vera would grab Freddie from his cot and carry him to the shelter, leaving her mother free to shepherd the other children to safety. Freddie was Vera's responsibility. Apart from Vera herself, only her parents and her older siblings, Muriel and Tony, knew the truth, that Freddie was Vera's son. When she had come home one winter's day and confessed that she'd let a good-looking sailor on leave sweet-talk her into bed, and that she was now expecting his child, her parents had stood by her in place of the vanished father and adopted the baby as their own. The neighbours guessed the true situation, but no comments were made. It wouldn't be the first nor the last time that a grandparent stood in for a parent, and the younger members of the family had simply accepted that on a warm July afternoon, Mam had had another baby, a boy called Freddie. One day, perhaps, thought Nancy as she'd held the tiny scrap of humanity only hours old in her arms, we may tell him the truth, but not until he's grown up. However,